Hello and welcome to this recording. I'm George, I'm a project consultant at Grad Consult, and in this session, in this 30-minute recording, we're going to be talking all about tools for decision making. And this is what we hope you take away from this session today. So firstly, we want to be able to situate imperfect decisions in an imperfect world. So not every decision you make has to be a perfect one if the world itself is not perfect. Also want to understand the different decision-making models as well. Just a few to run through to give you an idea about decision-making procedures and how you can formulate a decision-making process for yourself. Then going to consider what elements make up a good decision as well. And we want to understand how to make good decisions. So why are we doing this session today? Why is decision-making important? This already may be self-evident, but sometimes we can be indecisive. We can struggle to make a decision. So we've got a quote here that really sums up how important it is to make decisions. So it says here, it's by Jim Rohn, it doesn't matter which side of the fence you get off sometimes. What matters most is getting off. You cannot make progress without making decisions. So that's what it's all about. And as we said in the beginning of the recording, it's about making decisions in a world that isn't perfect anyway. So you don't have to be trying to achieve the most perfect decisions each time. Ideally, you want to be making the best decisions. Of course you do, but it doesn't have to be perfect, as there is no such thing. The sooner you can accept that, the sooner you can embrace that decision making is all about making the most, but choosing probably the best option at that time, the quicker you'll be able to make decisions and the quicker you'll be able to get things going. So here is the rational decision making model, and it has 6 steps, and it's the classic way of thinking. Now, this is not to say that this is how it should be all the time, but it's just to give you a bit of context how people usually make decisions and how they're trying to achieve the optimal decision making. But again, it's not about being perfect. This is just to give you an idea of the steps that people would take to make decisions. As you can see, there are 6 there. So the first one you'd want to do is identify the problem. You then want to generate options around the problem. You want to analyze those options, make sure they're actually viable. And ideally, you would select the best option. You would then implement the decision based on the best option. And then you want to evaluate and learn from the decision. Now, of course, it doesn't always follow this cycle, but this is good practice to follow. If you can make sure you're hitting those steps, you're more likely to make a better decision. But again, it's not about being perfect, but this just helps to give you a formula, something to follow when you're making decisions. It also gives people the opportunity to contemplate the opportunities and think about what they want to achieve. Think about how they can do it. Think about things that matter the most in their situation, and hopefully select the best choice that reflects their standards. However, as I've been trying to allude to the whole time, it's not perfect, and sometimes people don't have enough information available at the point where they actually do need to make a decision, which leads us to making a decision that is good enough. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with making a decision that is good enough at that time. You can only deal with what information you have. Ideally, we have as much information as we possibly can, but that's not the be all and end all. You can make decisions without knowing absolutely everything, that is the main theme so far, really. Making decisions in a world that isn't perfect. So it's all about doing what you can, taking the initiative, being decisive, and then learning from that. That's the most important step, is to actually reflect on the decisions that you've made and to learn from them. Not to criticize yourself and to think, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, but to think about your decision, why you made it, and what were the benefits, what were the negatives, and just to think about that and use that to make your decision the next time. Now, as I'm saying that, you might be thinking, well, if I constantly learn from my mistakes, eventually I'll be able to make the perfect decision, because I would have, constantly learned, and it gets me to that end point. But no, that won't be possible, because the environment, the situation you're in, is always changing, and you cannot control all of those external factors. So there's no need to worry about you trying to make the perfect decision, because it isn't possible. The environment is always changing. The situation you're in is always changing. So you're never going to be able to have 100% of all the information. Just do what you can, try and follow this formula, and that will help you to make good decisions. Moving on to a bit more explanation about how you can make good decisions as well in combination with the rational decision making method. So the first thing you can understand is to know your objectives as well. So understanding actually what you want to happen. What is the point of you making this decision in the first place? So knowing that helps to keep you grounded, it helps to keep you on track as well. The next point is to gather evidence and weigh the pros and cons. And okay, you can do this before you make the decision. You can also do it after as well. So think about the positive, think about the negatives. But before, when you're looking at decisions and you're thinking, okay, is this a viable option? Think about the pros and cons. There will be an element of confirmation bias when you do this. There will be some things that you expect to be a con or you expect to be a pro, and then you'll make it so because that is what you're looking for. So it's really important to take a step back and to not be emotionally attached to these decisions. Think about it rationally, think about it practically, so you can objectively see the pros and cons of the decisions that you're looking to weigh up. Next up is about managing your time. And this is an important point. We can definitely obsess over decision making, and we can think, okay, I'm going to dedicate all my time to this decision and I'm going to make it happen. That's it. That isn't the best thing to do. But again, you don't want the opposite side where you don't really do enough. You don't really put enough time in. So it is important to get that balance. You don't want to be obsessed. You don't want to have it drain you, overwhelm you, this decision, and the decisions that come after it as well. You do want to be able to hit that balance and manage your time as well as you possibly can. Next up will be to write down what needs to be done. Writing things down really does help to make it a concrete plan and to visualize it and see what you're going to be doing. It also helps because you might just forget things, and that is easily done. So when you write it down, it's there, it's in front of you. Not only will you more likely to remember it, especially if it's stored on a computer, something like that, you can always access it, but it helps you to reflect. Once you've seen it in front of you and you can then consider it a bit more, that will hopefully lead you to make a better decision. You can detach it from yourself, just from your mind only. There's a lot of noise in our minds as well. So when we write things down, we can clearly see, okay, that was the thought. That was the decision that I was thinking about. So it's definitely important to write them out just so you can have a better idea of the decision that you're looking to make, basically. Next up would be to consider whether a deeper issue may be complicating things. And this is really the crux of many, many projects. And it's that people are looking to fix something that is basically surface level. It's the thing that actually isn't the problem. It's the thing that seems to be the problem. It's probably the easiest thing to access, is the thing that's right in front of your face. But it could be that sometimes there's something way more fundamental that is causing the problem that needs to be addressed first, or could get them sorted out simultaneously. But it's definitely important to be aware of maybe the foundations of what could be causing the problems. It's also important to understand, going back to the first point as well, in considering the fifth point here, that your objectives are the key to the decision. So there might be some times where you're setting out your objectives and you're trying to work on this issue, but actually that was never the issue at all. And it might be hard for you to realize that what you're trying to achieve isn't the problem. So you do have to self-reflect. You do have to realize when you're maybe not being truthful with yourself. You're maybe not considering the reality of the situation. You've convinced yourself of what the objectives are, and you've convinced yourself this is the problem, this is the thing that I need to make a decision about. But actually, there's something else. You're reluctant to actually find the truth. It might be that if the truth does come to light, it could have a negative impact on other people, and you want to avoid that. So you could be handicapping yourself from the outset, which would make it difficult to make a good decision, and make it difficult to get a positive outcome. So just bear that in mind when you're making decisions. Just be self-aware so you can avoid falling into these traps, and use these practical tips when you're making decisions. This point about if there might be a deeper issue at play here can be seen in the example of the Titanic. So if you've seen the film, you'll know there's a little scene which basically has someone who is telling the captain, telling the crew to go a bit faster, basically. Imagine if they can get there before they said they would get there, they can get to their end destination. That would be a lovely surprise for the public. And also, this is made possible because the weather report is good. It's all positive. There is no problems whatsoever. So you'd believe that, okay, let's get there in quick time. And we know from the information that we have that the weather report is good, that's clear, we should keep going, there's going to be no issues along the way. You might be more inclined to believe that a weather report is okay because it's a confirmation of what you're about to do. It works with the fact, okay, I can get there quicker, actually, and that aligns well. So if you believe I want to get there faster, and this information here, the weather report is clear, helps with that, I'm going to go ahead and do it. That is my reality. That is my perceived reality. But that's not the actual reality. As it says here, the icebergs are actually closer than they expected. And they couldn't avoid them, maybe because they was going too fast, for example. So that just shows you how sometimes a plan can be flawed from the outset. And it can be that you're looking forward, and you're looking to make decisions, and you're looking for information that only confirms what you already know. That doesn't actually make you think critically about what you already know, what you're about to do. And it's a fine margin between success and an absolutely massive disaster, as we saw in this example. But you might be thinking about other examples now in your life where you're thinking, actually, maybe I did just concentrate on confirmation bias and was easily led by things I wanted to hear. It happens all the time, and it is human nature, and it's a big part of us. So what can we actually do to address it? Well, I believe it's the awareness first that allows us to make these decisions and allows us to avoid falling into the trap of our own intuition. So just bear that in mind when you're making decisions. And it relates back to the previous point in terms of things that are uncomfortable to hear, and that there's actually a deeper thing going on there that you're not considering because, well, it may make you abandon the decision, it may make you rethink it and feel like you might have to shape it up, and that could cost a lot of time and energy. But that might be the right decision for you. That might be the better thing to do, rather than going ahead with it when you know that it's probably not as sound, or at least trying to convince yourself that it is sounder than it actually is. So just bear in mind how our human nature can impact our decision making. It's also important to consider the manner of perspective as well. So I spoke about confirmation bias, and each individual will have certain things that relate to their own sort of confirmation bias. Everybody in their project or when they're making decisions will want to hear certain things because it helps to make them think they are on the right track. That is what I want to hear. I am doing the right thing. Other people will have different sort of biases as well, just different perspectives and different things they want to happen, different things that they actually don't want to happen as well. And that could manifest in the confirmation bias. That could manifest in plenty of other ways as well. But another part about perspective is that it actually requires maturity to realize that you need more knowledge, and you're actually respectful of other people's opinions when they are providing you with that knowledge. You're not dismissing other people just because it doesn't fit in with your ideas as well. Sometimes it's hard when someone else comes along and they've actually got information, they've actually got knowledge that might seem as a criticism of what you're trying to do, but it's not. It's just maybe more of an effective way. Of course, this doesn't. I'm not trying to say that you should just give up on whatever you believe in. Someone else comes along and has got an idea, you just accept that. But you do need to be willing to have an open mind and be willing to listen to other people, because what you don't want to do is disrespect other people who have different perspectives and they see it differently and they can offer some different insight. If you disrespect those people, they're not going to be encouraged to give you any feedback, to give you any insight. And these things could be crucial bits of information that you're missing because you've got the blinkers on, you've got the tunnel vision and narrow focus, and you're missing the bigger picture as well. It is easy for us to get hung up on something certain. So to go back to the Titanic, getting there before the time it was due. Seeing that actually the icebergs were further north, so we can go ahead with that. That does help to build the narrative. So it can be easy. We can have a lot invest in certain things, and it's hard to let go of that. It's hard to see beyond that. But these are the things that make the biggest difference. So definitely bear that in mind when you're making decisions, and definitely look to get other people's perspectives. It will really help to build a bigger picture and help you to make a more informed decision, basically. To help you reflect on your decision makings as well, ask yourself a few questions. So firstly, consider, why are we doing it this way? Second, think about, what if we did it another way? And thirdly, think, how would we do that? So it's important to be, if you know those three things and you can justify it, you can tell other people that, and they're on board and you're all working towards the same thing, then that's okay. Of course, you still want to be mindful of maybe the criticisms that people come along, because you don't want to just be constantly hearing what you want to hear. But if you can at least answer those questions, then you're on a good track. And if someone else has another suggestion, I'll get them to answer those questions as well. Think about why we're doing it, what if we did it another way, and how would we do that? Just allow people to answer those questions will really help to show that your plan, your decision makings are stronger. They're in a stronger and a more informed decision. It's definitely a better plan than the alternatives. So just use that to make the most informed decision that you possibly can. In terms of habits when we make decisions, now we've all been in education for a long time, especially if you go on to university as well. You've been molded in a certain way to learn certain things, and that has both us well. That works for that environment. So if you're in academia, often there is a right and wrong answer. So if you're in education, typically, majority of the time, there is definitely a right and wrong answer. Not always, but that is what happens most of the time. In work, that's not how it is. A lot of the time, there isn't a right or wrong answer. It's difficult to concretely say, this is the right thing to do. That's not how it works. There's a lot more uncertainty, and you have to get comfortable with that. And that leads on to the next point. When you're thinking, okay, there is a right and wrong answer, this means I need to find out as much information as possible to make the right decision. The right decision is there, so I need to find out all the information that points me to that right decision. If you remember what I said about confirmation bias, that can easily be done. You can say, I know there's a right decision, so I'm going to find all the bits of information that prove I'm right. That isn't the best way to approach it. You definitely want to balance that with thinking, okay, what would prove I'm wrong here? That would really help to bulletproof your decision. That then leads to the work environment, where there's more of an understanding that actually I won't be able to know all the information all the time. What it's about is that I can make the best decision at that time. Of course, ideally we would know as much as possible before we make a decision, but a lot of the time in work, there are shorter deadlines. Things need to be done quickly. Things move quickly. Things need to be adaptable. And it can't be that everybody has to wait until you're ready to make a decision. You're ready, you've done your research, and you've done it on your terms. There's a lot more at play. It's not just you completing an assignment. There's plenty of other things that are going on, and that's what you need to consider. Again, that leads to the next point. I can spend as much time as I choose revising. That is what we've known. That is what we've been taught throughout our education. But it's not strictly true in the work environment. Of course, typically, the more you revise, the better decisions you'll make, the better grades you'll get. However, that's not strictly how it works in the work environment. As it says there, time is limited and it costs money. There's resources that need to be considered. There's a wider picture, there's a bigger picture, there's a wider team that need to be considered as well. It's not all about you and you making decisions as well. Sometimes you have to be mindful of other people in the work environment. And that leads on to the next point. You're thinking, I need to spend as much time as possible so I can make the perfect decision. And hopefully you've realized by now, there is no such thing as the perfect decision. You don't only have one shot to get it right in the work environment. You can make a decision, see how it works, monitor it, and you can also make a different decision later, as long as you're honest and humble enough to admit you didn't get it right. It's not to say that you were wrong, because you might have thought that was the best decision at the time. It's not about putting the blame on people to say like you are right or wrong. It's just about understanding the decisions you make, why you made them, and what you could do better next time. Academia typically says this is your assignment, you've only got one chance at it, have a go. Of course, you have the reset element, but that's not really how it shows up in a work environment too much. So it's just about, whilst these things here do work in academia, it's about unlearning those habits before you actually move forward into the work environment. These things that you've known for a long part of your life and throughout education do not strictly work for the work environment. And that leads us on to some top tips for decision making. And you've probably heard a few tips as I've gone throughout, but here are some more tips, some concrete tips that I would say for you to take away from this session. The first one is not to artificially limit your choices. It's to be aware of the options that are out there. Don't think that, oh no, that can't be done for whatever reason. Try and really think about what options are available to you and consider them, and do what we said in terms of think about the pros and cons of all of the decisions that you can. Of course, it doesn't mean that you're going to indefinitely look for the options and looking at the choices and thinking, well, I'm not going to limit myself, so I'm just going to keep going. There does need to be a point where you are deciding, you do make a decision. But don't set artificial limits and thinking, oh no, that can't be considered because of so and so. Broaden your horizons, see what's out there, just so you can find what you can do, what options are available to you. The next point is to actually take some inspiration from other people. Now, that's not to say that people have faced the exact same issue as you, even though sometimes there are some problems where, yes, they actually have done the exact same issue or made the exact same decision and they've got it right, so you can replicate that. But sometimes there is just similar examples. Someone's done something that's slightly similar to what you're trying to do, and you can take a bit of inspiration from that. And also, you can learn from what other people have done as well. So if they've made errors doing something similar to you, you can figure out what was that. You don't need to dismiss when someone gets something wrong. You don't need to completely dismiss it. Learn from it and just think, what went wrong there? How can I avoid that? Or how can I incorporate the learnings from those errors in my decision making as well? You can definitely learn from other people. Whether they get it right or they get it wrong. You can't experience everything in life, but you can learn from your own mistakes, and you can learn from other people's mistakes as well. Things that you've yet to experience, you can learn from the errors that was done then in order to give you the best chance that you can at succeeding when you're making that decision. This point here relates to the pros and cons. Try to play devil's advocate. Build a case against your decision. This is probably the hardest thing to do, because typically we make decisions where we're thinking, well, no, I should be looking for ways to make this decision right, for ways to prove that this is the right decision. But again, you can easily fall into the trap of confirmation bias. And we don't want to do that. We want to truly see what is the right decision, what is the best decision that we can actually make at this time. Again, try not to fall into the false dichotomy of completely right and completely wrong. Just think about what you can do at that moment. What is the best chance you have at making the best decision, basically. Even so, building a case will allow you to say, okay, there's a few flaws here, but they can be worked out. We can find solutions to those things. Or it can make you realize, actually, this decision is a non-starter. It's never going to go anywhere. So you need to move on. It can be hard, which is why, as I said earlier, try not to get emotionally attached to your decisions. Try to see it as rational as you possibly can, following that rational model that we went through in the beginning. The next tip is to avoid making a full plan. Now, again, this may seem counterintuitive. Of course, you're going to make a full, comprehensive plan, aren't you? That's what you've been told. That's what really people do. If people always talk about how you have to plan, how you have to prepare for things, it's crucial. So why would you not make a full plan? Well, the thing is about making a full plan is that you could easily get emotionally attached to a full plan. If you make a smaller plan and then test it if you can, if you've got the capacity to. Sometimes we don't have the capacity to test our plans. But if you do a smaller plan, do a few tests, see what works, see what doesn't work. That will help you to realize that instead of putting all the work into creating this magnificent plan, this long-winded plan, it'll help you to realize if certain things are a non-starter. Ideally, we could do a few pilots of your ideas and just figuring out if that's the right thing to do. Sometimes it's not always the case, but you can build your plan from there. So it may be tempting to just think, I'm going to create a solid plan. All of my thoughts are in here, but then you're not getting any outside input, are you, in terms of your plan? So yes, ideally you want to prepare as much as you possibly can, but making a full plan leads to you probably being emotionally attached to that plan, and it leads to a lack of testing as well. So just bear that in mind. Start small, learn from others, and test for yourself if you can. The next point is about identifying your core priorities. So sometimes when we are making decisions, especially if it's a large project, there's a lot of decision making involved, we can actually lose sight of what we were trying to do in the first place. And it can be easy to justify certain things and be like, okay, yeah, we'll make that change, but actually it's not what you wanted to achieve in the first place. So you need to bear in mind, what is it that we actually wanted to set out to achieve on this project? What was our non-negotiables, things that we're just never going to bend on? So just bear those in mind so that when you are making changes, you're not falling into those traps. You don't want to stray too far away from what your core priorities are. Otherwise, you're not going to be achieving what you set out to achieve in the first place. There will need to be some level of flexibility and adaptability. Absolutely crucial to be able to adapt when things aren't going your way, when things need to be changed. But it shouldn't be at the cost of things that are non-negotiable. It shouldn't take away that the whole reason you're doing a thing that you set out to do in the first place. So keeping your core priorities at the forefront of your mind will avoid you falling into those traps and help you achieve what it is you actually set out to achieve in the first place. And we've just got this image on this slide here. Let's talk about a theme that was mentioned throughout the presentation in terms of right and wrong answers. There is no way you can make a decision, and once you've done that decision, think, actually, I'm going to go back and try the other one and see what works better. It's not possible. Once you've selected to go down a path, that is it. You are on that path. There's so many different routes that you can take. It's up to you to actually make the decision that you've chosen to be the right one. It is hard because it's human nature to always consider, what would be the opposite? Or you may have heard the saying, the grass is always greener on the other side. Of course it is. It's the thing we didn't put the effort in. It's the thing that could have happened. We only think about the positives with the alternative. We only think about, that could have been better because so-and-so. We rarely think about how the alternative could have had a few cons. If you go back to when you made a decision and think about how you actually scrutinized your decision, you'll be less likely to have these regrets, to think, it should have been that one. Use that same energy in terms of your criticism of your own decisions for the alternatives as well. And just realize you cannot make the perfect decision. And it leads on to this quote here, which is, sometimes you make the right decision. You get lucky and everything works out. And sometimes you make the decision right. It is that simple. You can pick whatever you do, whatever choices you make, you can make it right as it possibly can be anyway. Again, it's not about being perfect. It's just about making the best decision that you possibly can and then working hard to make it work as well. So that's all for this session, for this 30-minute recording, and it is just to emphasize the importance of decision making. Hopefully you can reflect on your own decisions, and hopefully you can reflect on some principles here and use that to make future decisions. That's all for today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.